Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we're talking about Jimmy Olsen. That's right, we're going to continue talking about Superman the movie. And more specifically, today we're talking about why Jimmy Olsen matters to Superman. I mean, he's a character that we haven't really seen a ton of in live action movies for some time. The last appearance in a live action movie was in the DCEU. I believe it was in Batman versus Superman. We find out that he's assisting Lois Lane on this expedition out into some country. I think he was either in Africa or the Middle East. And then we find out that the character, at least the Jimmy Olsen of the DCEU, was working for the CIA and taking photographs, which is he's a photographer in the comics. Which part was accurate, but the whole CIA double agent situation, then he ends up getting killed and blah 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 blah. Not a very bright and lively or optimistic version of the character, but like we have seen very different iterations in TV shows like Supergirl. We had Mecca Brooks played him, and that was a character that went through quite a bit of development. It eventually ends up becoming the Guardian. Doesn't really have powers, but he's sort of like out there with a shield and a costume and a helmet. So he did that for a little bit, and then he ended up leaving the show. And there's other iterations, but we have Skyler Gisondo casted now as Jimmy Olsen in the new Superman movie. James Gunn has been very excited about that. He's going with that more classic look. At least it feels like, if you go by the comics and what Skyler looks like, of course. So the question becomes, like, just how much is he going to fit into the story? What is his role going to be? Is he going to be that one-off of a character that kind of pops in for one movie and then is somehow gotten rid of somehow? I mean, I don't know. Like, maybe he gets into harm's way and gets killed off. But or maybe he will stick around and become Superman's best friend. Maybe he will be one of Clark's biggest allies outside of Lois Lane at the planet. So let's talk about that. And of course, as always, John, how are you doing today? Let's talk about Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, Jimmy Olsen was it kind of the gears were kind of turning yesterday because we were talking about crypto, how he's never really shown that much, and then I'm like, I was kind of thinking about Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy Olsen is a character that I feel like not a lot of people get, um, because a lot of people kind of like a lot of people like on the surface associate him with the surface level idea of what Robin is like, oh,
Right,
he's like
right.
this like cheesy little fucking kid that gets like into trouble and Superman has to save him and like all that stuff, when there's a lot more like nuance and like shades of gray to the character, mainly for Robin. But like I think Jimmy Olsen, yeah, he does fit into the more sillier aspects more so than Robin does. But I think um I think Jimmy Olsen deserves a lot more credit because I think Jimmy Olsen is just one of those characters that you just kind of need to have. Like it's like having a Superman movie without Lois Lane or having a Superman movie without, Perry White. It's just like these characters matter too much to this guy's mythos and matter too much to like Superman as a whole, because I think like Jimmy Olsen really is the audience surrogate. Like he exists to kind of bring us into the fold. He's kind of like the companion for the Doctor, where on Doctor Who, again, I have to make my Doctor Who reference, so there's that. But it's like you need that character, or else we're just kind of following this guy um that it's like, wow, this the guy. And not saying that, as you know we've said many times, Superman can be relatable, but sometimes when he's like wearing those tights, he's kind of doing his thing and saving people. Sometimes it could be like, oh, that, wow, this guy is so great. But like when you bring in Jimmy Olsen into the fold and you bring him to be it's like we can all be Superman's pal. It's like adding into more of that human element of like we can all be, friends with Superman. Wouldn't that be great? Just to be best friends with Superman, being best friends with like the best guy on planet Earth. Wouldn't that be fucking awesome? So that's why I think Jimmy Olsen matters. Yeah, you can do like a lot of like silly things with him. Like mainly Silver Age stuff was brought in a lot of the silliness, but Jimmy Olsen also kind of, there's a reason he's called Superman's pal. Yes, he has kind of that audience surrogate sort of thing, but he is also Superman's genuine friend. Like, he
Right.
does kind of bring in that human element for Superman in a way. Like, he is there for him when nobody else is, you know? Maybe something, I don't know, it just happens and it's like Lois is off like doing her thing, a Batman is off fighting Ra's al Ghul or something, and we just kind of need somebody there to be your pal. And Jimmy will always be there because Jimmy, he just like, no matter, even though he's a little naive, maybe he gets into trouble a lot, he's always there. Like, he's always there for Superman, and it's nice to like have that. And again, we're kind of, as we've been saying throughout a lot of these more recent, videos on
Yeah.
the upcoming Superman movie, is like James Gunn trying to bring in more of that, human element, that more, maybe not grounded aspect, just like that sort of like that humanity that Superman kind of lacked for so long, because Injustice did really well, so they were like, oh, so this is what the people want. They want evil Superman, so let's keep doing that for years and years and years until everyone gets sick of it. So that's kind of what happened. But now it's like, okay, we have Superman and Lois. That was definitely big. We have My Adventures with Superman. We had all this stuff that like kind of, brought Superman back into the fold of like this guy who's just like this like silly guy that like, does a lot of good because he wants to. And I feel like, you know, that's what Jimmy does. Like, Jimmy brings in a lot
Right.
of that human element for us as the audience, but for Superman as a character, and I feel like we're trying to reshape that. Like, he's kind of going through a bit of a resurgence. Like, we have like the more like silly, like quote unquote silly version. We have the My Adventures of Superman version. They're bringing him into Superman and Lois, as it has been confirmed. I believe it was last season that this is separate from the original Arrowverse universe. So we are getting this version of Jimmy Olsen, different from the Makad Brooks version, who was in Supergirl. But yeah, I just think like Jimmy Olsen is kind of, underrated and misrepresented a lot, and needs to, have that, as having that resurgence. And I really appreciate that, because I don't know, it just works. It's like, I mean, come on. Like, in the comic book, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, fucking Darkseid made his first appearance in a Superman's pal comic. That's gotta mean something, right? I mean, come on. Darkseid, fucking Mr.
It's
Fourth World Apocalypse ruler, introduced in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. You can look it up. So that's gotta mean something. And that's pretty
yeah.
awesome.
No,
So
I mean it's also like the character goes back quite a ways even beyond that. Like I was looking this up earlier and it looks like the character was introduced, now unnamed, that it wasn't really officially called Jimmy Olsen, but you can almost trace back the history, to Action Comics number 6 in 1938, where we first saw this character just called Office Boy, and he eventually ends up getting named and featured in the the Adventures of Superman radio show, like you mentioned, 1940 and onwards. But if you were to trace that history all the way back to 1938, I mean, this character is about as old, if not older, than even Batman. So, and like you said, so central to who Superman is. It's also the audience's, sorry, like view and perspective into the world of Superman, because he's that average Joe, and he's not called Joe, but he's Jimmy. He's the average Jimmy that we can all relate to. And so I really like that idea, because when it comes down to it, you ultimately want to create this world around Superman that's more than just what Superman does, but it's also about who Superman is. And I think that's the big difference. Is in the DCEU, Zack Snyder focused a lot on what Superman does and what Superman means to the world. And I'm not saying he didn't focus on who Superman is as a person, who Clark Kent is. It just seemed like the more we got into like the whole, even especially with the dark side and all, all of the side and all the full fourth world characters, we seem to be getting away from, kind of really learning more about the world that Superman lives in his day-to-day life. And that's something that I hope that with somebody like Skyler Gisondo, with James Gunn directing the movie, that we start to see more of that. more of that world of Superman. I'm not gonna say Team Superman because that just brings back memories of the Arrowverse where they sort of like, overused that whole concept. But I would like to see more people that, Clark interacts with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
Certainly going beyond like his parents and Lois Lane and Perry White. Like let's get
yeah,
some more. I mean, we had Steve Lombard and like we had other characters, but again, they were pretty minor. I'm hoping here that we start to see those relationships develop and then they continue on beyond maybe just one movie or a couple of movies. Especially because like Jimmy Olsen, like historically has been a character that's sort of grown with Clark and kind of moved up in the world in the hierarchy of the Daily Planet, and
oh
then
yeah,
also kind of even moved beyond. Like there's versions of Jimmy Olsen that have superpowers, right? Like there's Elastic Lad. Like wouldn't you like if you want to go old school, Elastic Lad would be the kind of name you want to bring back, and like you really want to go retro,
oh
you
yeah.
really want to go
I
gold and
mean, they
silver
made
age. Like
him
that's
Guardian in
yeah.
Supergirl, which was not spectacular, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, it mixed results. Like I don't know. Like I was like in theory that should have been a good idea, but ultimately I was like, this is Supergirl show, and it just felt like there were a couple of
Yeah,
episodes where
that
they
that was the biggest problem with a lot of the Arrowverse, just
yeah
everybody had to be super. Like, did nobody listen to Syndrome and The Incredibles?
right.
When everyone's
But he's
super, no
super.
one will be.
No
You
one
gotta
will.
have some,
Yeah,
like, regular
exactly.
Joes in there to keep it
Yes,
grounded, like,
yes.
as we said, bringing that human element, not everybody has to be a fucking superhero. And they were, like, trying to make him like Batman, and it was just, like, not working, and it was just
It,
like, I mean, the suit doesn't look too bad, but, like,
right, even with the shield and everything, but
it was just a little too ridiculous. But it's like, yeah, we have like this long, long history of this character. Kind of reminds me of Aquaman in a way where he just constantly got shit on. But he hasn't had that Jason Momoa resurgence,
right,
like where everyone
right.
loves him. It's like he's still kind of seen as this dweebish
Yeah,
little kid that nobody cares about. When he's more than that. I feel like he's just so much more than that. Like he was this character that, as you said, that was like a nobody in the comics, and then the radio show did so much for Superman. The radio show and the Fleischer cartoon did so much for Superman as a character and really developed that like beyond and farther than we thought it would be. Because, I think it was the show that brought in Kryptonite. There was, or like like an early version of it. We have this. We had like a lot of heroes that were like a lot of proto versions of like heroes and villains that would appear in the radio show, and then later on, and as we said in the inspirations episode, the Fleischer cartoon brought in the fact that Superman flew rather than just jumping. Um, so it was easier to animate. So they did a lot of the stuff, and Jimmy Olsen really, that because of the radio show, really like became something of a character. And then uh he would go on to be in the show, the Jack Larson show. And then another thing, Jack Larson in in the Adventures of Superman show with George Reeves, that was another character. Because of that, we got Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen in the comics. Like we got these characters, the media, like that's what I kind of loved about like the old school like thing, where it was like you had the comics, but then the media kind of like really like further developed the
right,
comic, and then which further developed the media of the shows, which further like for instance, going a little bit off topic here. I didn't realize this until I did some more research. I forget what I was doing research for, but it was like how William Dozier, the producer behind the 66 Batman show, was the reason why Barbara Gordon's Batgirl became a character. Because originally it was Betty Kane, so when it was Bat slash Girl, so you have that. Like I liked it. Now it's just kind of like, oh, there's this character that was introduced in a show. I guess we'll make them part of the comics now, and it just like it doesn't feel like there's like I guess like a symbiotic relationship, no pun intended, for like the comics and the media. It's just kind of like media does something, the comics will copy that purely on the grounds because we need more readers, even though nobody's gonna fucking read comics anymore. It's just that's what it is. But it's just like I like how like there was kind of that, and then so Jimmy developed over like the black and white to eventual color TV show definitely did a lot for Jimmy. Like he, that character that we all like, that plucky comic relief, and then there was the two versions on New Adventures of Superman. Then we got the whole weird thing with Smallville, how it was like they were was it like twins or something? And it was like he had a younger brother, but then he was called like his middle name was Jimmy, and then like, oh, let's call him Jimmy because I don't know, because it was like they had the character, they killed him off, then his younger brother became the real Jimmy Olsen. It was like a whole thing. It was ridiculous. But then you had that, and then as we said, the Arrowverse was stuff with Macabre Brooks. It's just this character that just is like there's a reason this character is consistent. That's why he wasn't like forgotten as Office Boy back in like the 30s and 40s. Like he's this character that does so much for this mythos. And like you have the stuff that really, really worked, and then the stuff that really didn't work. Like Jimmy Olsen being a CIA agent because we can't fit him in anywhere. Like, what do you mean you can't fit him in anywhere? What the fuck are you talking about? He's Jimmy Olsen. He deserves your goddamn respect. Get the hell out. Like, I remember there was this really great video of somebody making the argument for Jimmy Olsen, and how they're like in like Superman. They were talking about Superman Returns, played by Sam Huntington there, and there was like a lot of what you could get away with on old school TV. But uh, but yeah, he was making the argument how like like Clark Kent finally comes back, and like nobody gives a shit about him. Like it's bustling of Metropolis, but then the one person that sees Clark Kent is Jimmy Olsen, giving him a big hug and a cake, like welcome back. And it's just like, oh, that's just so nice. And like I hope we have like something like that in the DCU. There's just so much with this character that needs to be like done. And I feel like even in media, even in comics, I still feel like he hasn't gotten over that like mainstream hump that like I think Robin has gotten, because like Robin has like that character has just been like it just like with how many iterations there are, how much character development, like with Nightwing and Red Hood and Red Robin and Stephanie Brown and Helena Wayne and like all these other and Duke Thomas, all these other characters, even though Duke Thomas isn't a Robin, but whatever. Like there's a lot of with Robin and the Bat family. So I feel like Robin got over that. Jimmy Olsen has yet to be like when Zack Snyder can't see that, but I mean, to be fair, Zack Snyder didn't really see a lot when it came to the character of Superman. That's aside the point. But I feel like Jimmy Olsen needs to, really get a proper mainstream resurgence because he's so awesome. He's so lovable. He's so like we need Superman's pal again. I filibustered for a while. I apologize. But it's just like I want him respected, God damn it. Jimmy Olsen deserves some goddamn respect. I won't rest. I want pictures of Jimmy Olsen. Get out of here.
I mean, it's also because it's sort of it's got that it kinda has that feel of, like, Spider-Man because he's a photographer, so, like, he could be getting those impossible pictures of Superman in action, whereas, like, in the world of Spider-Man, it's like, how does Peter Parker come up with these pictures? And, here Jimmy's got the inside scoop on Superman for Clark Kent and stuff like that, or there's all kinds of other ways you can incorporate the character. I would love to see more of that. Um, do you think there was a particular way, like, obviously, you sort of shared the whole wouldn't it be nice, like, Clark Kent pops in to the office and, with a birthday cake or something like that, but how do you think Skyler Gisondo figures into the story of Superman? Like,
I feel like
how are we gonna see him in this movie? Is he gonna be a
I feel
small
like it,
part or
I feel like
significant
he'll
part of
have
the
like a
film?
decent part because I feel like he'll like I know it would be a really good scene. It would be like if we're going off of my theory that there isn't going to be a real villain of the movie and it's just going to be like Superman's like wholesome nature versus the edgy, dark, nihilistic world. I think like a like once we get to that point in like a screenplay, the Dark Night of the Soul, which is like second act
Right.
into third act.
Like where you feel like
You get
you've lost all hope. That's kind of that part
we've
in
lost all hope.
Dark Night of the
Nothing's
Soul.
going right, and like we have like a conversation with Jimmy Olsen, and he's like, you know what? Maybe it's him as Clark, maybe it's him as Superman. I don't know, but he's like, well, the heroes I know would stop at nothing to be the best they can be. It would be really awesome if if they do the famous "Dreams Save Us" speech, and but he gets that from Jimmy Olsen. Like he's like, I have the heroes. They try to the heroes I know try to be the best they can be. They want to better the world. They want to, save people. They want this this world to be they want a better tomorrow, like the new Superman motto. I don't agree with the better tomorrow part. I prefer American way, but that's beside the point. But in order to add that in, they want the real heroes want a better tomorrow, and sure, that might be a dream to some of us, but you know what? Dreams save us. And then he can kind of have like a choppy bit of the famous speech at the end of what's so funny about truth, justice, and the American way. And then that kind of reinvigorates Superman to really just this
Right.
world needs not edgy crap that where people are getting murdered in the streets because they think they have the right because they wear a costume. It's like, no,
Yeah.
what everything that this country and what the world was built on, I think we can be better. And you know what? If that's just a dream, you know what? Dreams are fucking awesome because you can fly around in a dream. You can do anything in a dream. And you know what? They save us. So I feel like that, I think it would be really awesome if you you
That's very
have the
well
down
put.
on his
Yeah.
luck Clark Kent. He's like, there's nothing's going right. And then Jimmy Olsen comes in and just be like, no, don't sell yourself short. Be the best you can be because that's what heroes are. Like
Right.
the another great quote is courage is not, I'm going to butcher the quote, but courage is not about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing what you have to do anyway. Again, going back to that, but just something like that. I feel like a good conversation between them, showcasing that this character matters no matter what, no matter how many people try to say, "Oh, he's a dumbass in distress. He doesn't matter. He just deserves a bullet in the head." Blah blah blah. No, Jimmy Olsen doesn't deserve that. He's Superman's pal
Yeah.
until the bitter end. No matter what you try to do to him, you can make him evil. You can make him Two Face. You can make him this. You can make him that. You can make him Elastic Lad, but he tries to take over the world. No, that's not him. He's there for Superman, and that's what I want to see. I feel like that would be just again another. I'm offering a lot of great ideas, Mr. Gunn. I want these scenes. I want to showcase that Jimmy Olsen is not just another character who's there in the Daily Planet. He is integral to Superman's development as a character and integral to that mythos. I want to see that, goddamn it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I think there's a lot of ways in which you could fit him into the story and do it in a way that feels natural. Like I think the one thing you want to avoid is having too much of that. I felt like that kept in Falcon the Winter Soldier that speech at the end that the new Captain America played Sam Wilson gives felt a little forced. I'm like I'd love to see something like that, but it's always difficult to get a monologue to feel right. But
Yeah,
there's countless examples of that, like the Independence Day, Pacific Rim. You can do it right.
yeah,
I think James Gunn has probably made some, at least on the surface so far, it feels like he's made some good decisions with regards to who he has brought in for these roles. And the one thing I was going to also mention in Man of Steel, they have that sort of a Dark Night of the Soul moment, and Superman ends up in like a church, and he talks. This pastor is like, well, sometimes you have to just kind of take a leap of faith and the trust part comes later. And in the moment I was like, could that pastor's name be Jimmy Olsen? And then, like, we find out in BVS, nope, that was the photographer who was also a CIA agent. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I personally thought Mehcad Brooks did a good job in Supergirl. I just felt like it was a character that I wanted to
I
see interact more with Superman because,
I
like,
get what they
when
were trying
Superman
to do.
shows up in the show, they don't have chemistry whatsoever, and it's like you're supposed to be his best friend, and that's how he's portrayed, especially when they first introduce him. But over the course of the show, it just I don't know, the character sort of just like meandered, then went away, then came back, then became Guardian, then eventually went away again. It was just
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, it's
just
a
like
TV
I
show
feel
though,
like
so
after season 1, they didn't know what to do with him because
right,
they were setting him up for them to, like, be together, Jimmy and Supergirl, which
right.
is kinda
And which
weird, but, like
they took that pretty far, but then they pulled
and
away,
then,
and it
like,
was
for some reason, I understand stuff had to be rewritten because you couldn't get all the
yeah,
actors back, because it was they had to move to Vancouver because it was on the CW now, not on CBS. I get all that, but, like, I don't understand how, like, what that had to do with Jimmy Olsen. And then he's like, I just feel like he's just, you know, too cool. Like, I get he was supposed to be like a more developed Jimmy Olsen, where obviously he's not going to be like this little dweebish kid forever.
yeah, yeah, he doesn't
Like,
have
but
to.
it's
I
just
mean,
like,
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like he's just kind of the cool black guy stereotype in a lot of ways that they kind of made Jimmy Olsen that, which isn't inherently a bad thing. I'm all for different interpretations. It's just like I feel like the way they went about it was just kind of like off. And then on top of that, you had the move to the CW. You've really backtracked this character. You didn't know what he was doing. Like he becomes like the head of Catco, and like then
yeah,
you had all this other shit. And then like Andrea Rojas comes in and like fires him because he wants to, you know, I want to focus on truth. Oh, that's not what modern journalism is about. It's about clicks. And it's like then you have that, and then he's like, I'm gonna go back to my hometown newspaper, and it's just like, and then we never see him again. So it's like, and then we get his
yeah.
sister who sucks, and then it's just like I don't get what's going on here. Like this was just like a very like I feel like the writers knew what they wanted to do, and then they're just like, why not chaos instead? And threw everything out. Like, I just don't like you had a plan. Yeah,
They should
we
have
had a
stuck with that
plan.
plan.
We had a
Yes,
plan. It's like, why are you throwing out the plan? I understand
right.
that's Captain Cold's way of handling things, but that's not how you guys should handle things.
Exactly, yeah.
Make the plan, expect the plan to go off the rails, throw away the plan. Like,
The
you had the
plan.
plan. Why are you doing this?
Right. It was I still remember being disappointed. I'm like, "Yes, they're finally gonna, like, get together," then they're just, like, just fizzles out and, like I'm like, "Oh, come on." Like, that was such they just poured cold water all over that, and then, yeah, from there, it just became yeah, like you said, there was no plan. Um, I mean, like, ultimately, I thought the character of Jimmy Olsen or I think ultimately the character of Jimmy Olsen has been mistreated or mishandled, or we just haven't seen the full potential of the character over the last, 5 or 10 years. Certainly, maybe even going far back as, if you go back to like the Christopher Reeves movies, maybe that was the last time you could really say they did it well. Even Smallville sort of had a mixed track record with the character. So hopefully James Gunn is gonna like do the character
Yeah,
justice.
following
He's
that
certainly
resurgence.
cast. Hmm?
Yeah. Following that
Yeah.
resurgence, yeah.
Exactly, the resurgence, and it's also he's cast somebody here who feels like the right age, to kinda grow into the role over time. I don't think we're gonna have a situation where he comes in and gets disposed of in the same movie, like in Batman versus Superman, where clearly they just weren't interested in that aspect of Superman's story all that much. So, having said that, I mean, guys, let us know in the comments what you think about this. Is Jimmy Olsen a character that you'd like to see a lot more of? I know that yesterday after our crypto episode, we got a lot of good comments and feedback about that. There were some really, fantastic comments.
Oh, yeah.
Like I think Jay Kelly was like, "Hey, honestly, at first I didn't want to see crypto because I felt it was so silly. However, after pondering on it, I really want Gunn to create a universe where these types of creatures are common to the world and naturally fit into the world. Gunn made it work in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. why not in the DCU? And I'm like, that's the spirit. Like, yes, absolutely. I'm glad we were able to get like the just the ideas churning a little bit. And then in my dream in orbit 9297 also mentioned it. I know it's not the case, but it feels like Guardians 3 was a test bed for Gunn on how to depict flight and a dog character. I think he nailed the flying aspect with Adam Warlock. I thought he did too. And then Cosmo was great. Cosmo was always great, even in the holiday special. Guardians, like, I was love watching Cosmo. I trust James Gunn will make crypto work for this universe, says my dream in orbit 1997. And then he says, I'm very excited to see the super cousins and the family pet on screen, which I'm like, you know what? Like when you put it like that, yes, why not? And we love that
Yeah.
kind of like feedback. We love those kind of comments, and we will do our best to kind of feature them on the show. Of course, if you guys have any thoughts about Jimmy Olsen, then you're welcome to to let us know, whether it's in the live chat or drop them down in the comments below. And if you like the video, then of course hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, you think we're full of hot garbage, then you can dislike. We love the interaction either way. Show us how you feel, tell us how you feel. And then of course, if you're here often enough, you're here Monday through Friday on DC Daily, each and every day, giving you the latest updates. Of course, James Gunn recently responded on Threads, I believe, speaking of updates, about the Waller show, where somebody was asking like, hey, Corey Hawkins, is he going to be in Waller? And then James Gunn is like, well, the scripts aren't finished. They haven't even started the casting process. So when things like this drop, or I think recently Jake Gyllenhaal was like, he was kind of flattered that Christopher Nolan personally called him to say like, hey, you didn't get the role of Batman back in the day, and how it was like it was a motivator for him to keep going, especially back then when in the early 2000s Jake Gyllenhaal was very much only just getting started. Like most of his best work was still ahead of him. Not and even now I would say some of his best work is still well ahead of him, but he's got much more of a resume. So if there's any development on that side, I'm sure we'll be talking about who's going to be the DCU's Batman. So there's all kinds of upcoming news, like with whether it's Joker Folie 2, the Penguin, of course, Superman. They've been filming now for basically a month. Any kind of behind the scenes images that come out, we'll be sure to discuss those. John is super excited for this movie, and I think we had a pretty good conversation about crypto yesterday, and then today it's been great talking to you guys about Jimmy Olsen. So we'll be back here again, tomorrow with more to talk about. We haven't quite figured out what it is going to be. I know we're talking about lanterns on Friday. Maybe there'll be some breaking news that we can get into. But if you have any ideas, then drop them in the comments below. And then until tomorrow, go out there, watch something DC related, then come back here and talk to us about it. We love hearing from you guys. And until then, John, it's been a pleasure as always. And we'll see you here on DC Daily next time.